They say knowledge is power. But no one tells you what happens when power outruns a soul. Victor Frankenstein wasn't born a monster. He was born curious. A boy with a mind like fire, raised in the age of reason but obsessed with forbidden things, alchemy, ancient texts, and the madmen of science who once tried to conquer death. While others sought fame or fortune, Victor wanted more. He wanted to play God. At university, surrounded by anatomy labs and the scent of decay, he found his answer not in books, but in bodies, flesh, bone, wires. He stitched together a man from the dead, piece by piece, not out of cruelty, but obsession. He believed he could cure death, end sorrow, rip the soul from time's grasp, and force it back into the body. And then, on a storm-split night, he did it. Lightning arced across the sky. The wind screamed like something ancient was waking. And in that moment, sweat-drenched, terrified, Victor gave life to his creation. But what rose from that table wasn't salvation. It was a mirror, a grotesque reflection of everything Victor refused to face. He ran. The moment the creature opened its eyes, yellow, wet, human but not, Victor fled. Not out of fear for his life, but fear of what he had done. The dream he'd pursued with sacred passion now looked back at him with a face stitched from corpses. Victor never named the creature, never took responsibility, never called it son, though he had birthed it. Instead, he left it to wander into a world that would never understand it. Alone, confused, barefoot in the snow, a child in the body of a monster. But creation without love is not a gift. It's a curse. Victor thought he had conquered nature. Instead, he had violated it. And nature remembers, because in Frankenstein, the horror isn't just that a man made a monster. It's that he made it and then abandoned it. And from that sin, creation without compassion, an entire tragedy is born. Not just a science gone wrong, but a soul split in two. The maker, the made, and the war that begins between them. Imagine opening your eyes and being hated by the world before you've even spoken a word. The creature was not born evil. He was born empty, a blank slate, trembling in the cold, left to die by the only being who knew his name, though even that name was never spoken. His first days were survival, darkness, forest hunger. He stole food like an animal, hid in shadows like a ghost. And every time he tried to step into the light, into humanity, he was met with screams, stones, and fists, not because he attacked, but because he existed. In a quiet forest, he found shelter beside a cottage. Through a crack in the wall, he watched a family, poor but kind, a blind old man, a son and daughter. They spoke with love, touched with gentleness. The creature listened, learned. He taught himself to speak, to read, to feel. He didn't want revenge. He wanted to belong. Day after day, he brought firewood to the family's door, silently helping. He hoped, prayed, that if he could just show them his soul, they might see past his face. And when he finally built up the courage to speak to the blind man, it almost worked. The old man didn't flinch. He listened. He welcomed him. But then the children returned, and the illusion shattered. They beat him, drove him away, called him names not meant for anything living, and something inside him broke. The monster fled, not just from them, but from hope itself. He had tried to be gentle, tried to earn kindness, but he realized a brutal truth. The world did not care who he was. It cared only what he looked like. He was not a man. He was an other, unloved, unclaimed, unforgiven. He found Victor's journal tucked in the coat he had stolen on that first night, the notes of his creation. He read every word, and in those pages, he found his origin, his father, his abandonment, and then he made a choice. If he could not earn love from mankind, he would earn fear, because monsters are not born. They're made by silence, by cruelty, by a creator who runs instead of reaching out. What happens when a child looks for his father and finds only silence? The creature had a purpose now, not destruction, not chaos, but confrontation. He would find Victor Frankenstein. He would speak to him, not as a monster, but as a son abandoned. And he would ask the one question that burned like fire in his mind. Why did you make me? If you were only going to hate me. He tracked Victor across mountains, forests, towns. Always one step behind. Always watching. And finally, on the icy slopes of Mont Blanc, he spoke. Victor reeled. Not because the creature attacked, but because he spoke like a man. Intelligent. Wounded. A soul in torment. And for a moment, the scientist listened. The creature told his story. The rejection, the pain, the learning, the kindness he tried to give, the hatred he received in return. He begged, not for revenge, but for companionship. I am alone, he said. You gave me no mother, no people, no name. Make me a mate. Someone like me. Someone to share this curse. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea. Victor hesitated. He felt guilt, but also fear. What if they had children? What if he made a race of monsters? He agreed, reluctantly, promised he'd build her. But as the creature waited, hidden in the woods, Victor changed his mind. He destroyed the second creation before he ever gave her life. And in that moment, something shifted forever. The creature watched in the shadows as the pieces of his only possible companion were torn apart, as Victor cursed him again, as the only door to love was slammed shut. And then the promise came, not whispered, not screamed, but spoken like a vow carved in bone. I will be with you on your wedding night. Not because he wanted to kill joy, but because Victor had killed hope. The monster wasn't just hunting Victor. He was haunting him. Because Victor didn't just create life. He created loneliness. He brought something into the world that didn't belong, didn't fit, and didn't ask to be alive. And now, that creation would become his consequence. Not as a beast, but as a reflection. A mirror of Victor's own madness, guilt, and godlike ambition turned to ash. Revenge doesn't always begin with rage. Sometimes, it begins with sorrow too deep for words. When Victor tore apart the creature's only chance at love, he didn't just kill a dream. He declared war. And the creature, once a child begging for warmth, became something else entirely. A shadow stitched from grief. He didn't strike immediately. He waited, followed Victor from village to village, always unseen, always near. And then, on Victor's wedding night, just as promised, he struck. But he didn't kill Victor. He killed Elizabeth, Victor's bride, his last light, the one pure thing he had left. And he did it not with hate alone, but with logic. The same cold, merciless logic Victor used when he abandoned his creation. You took my love, the creature might have said, so now I take yours. And Victor, once a proud man of science, was shattered, but he wasn't innocent. He had tried to cheat death, played God, brought life into a world that had no place for it, and then he ran from it, again and again, until the consequences caught up to him. Not in court, not in lecture halls, but in blood. Elizabeth's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a final descent. Victor buried her with trembling hands, buried his dreams, buried his name, and then he picked up a gun and began a hunt, across glaciers, through frozen oceans, into the ends of the earth. He chased the creature, the hunter and the hunted, but which was which? Victor wasn't searching for justice. He was searching for release. And the creature? He left messages carved into trees, bodies in the snow, footprints just out of reach. Not just a taunt, but to talk. He didn't want death. He wanted acknowledgement. One final act of responsibility. But Victor wouldn't give it. He was too far gone, too broken, too guilty. The storm between them wasn't good versus evil. It was a man facing his own mistake and refusing to forgive it. Because what makes Frankenstein terrifying isn't the horror of a monster run wild. It's the horror of a father who runs from his child. A man who tried to create life and then refused to love it. By the time the ship found him, Victor Frankenstein was barely human. Half-starved, delirious, drifting through the Arctic ice like a ghost chasing shadows. Captain Walton, a fellow man of science, rescued him, nursed him, listened, and Victor told him everything, the ambition, the experiment, the creation, the deaths. But it wasn't a confession. It was a warning. He begged Walton to learn from his mistakes, to fear knowledge without wisdom, to fear progress that forgets people, and most of all, to fear the arrogance of man playing God. Victor died not long after, cold, alone, haunted by a legacy he couldn't undo. But that wasn't the end. The creature came, in the dead of night. He stepped onto the ship where Victor's body lay, not to gloat, not to kill, but to mourn. He wept, not because his creator was gone, but because he had loved him in his own monstrous way, loved the one who cursed him, hated him, ran from him. He had begged for a name, a place, a chance, and got none of it, but he still came to say goodbye. And then he asked for one thing, to be forgotten. He told Walton he would build his own funeral pyre, high in the Arctic, far from the world of men, and there, surrounded by nothing but snow and sky, he would burn his own body, because even monsters deserve to end their pain. He vanished into the mist, a silhouette against the northern lights, and with him went the last voice of a story that was never about evil, but about grief. Because Frankenstein is not just a tale of horror, it's a tale of abandonment, of a man who wanted to make something perfect, and instead made something human, of a creature who asked one simple thing: if I must live in your world, will you let me live in it? And when the answer was no, he didn't become evil. He became us, lost, lonely, looking for someone to say, I see you, but no one ever did. So he disappeared like all the things we don't want to face, and the ice closed behind him. Thank you for watching. If this story made you feel something, not just fear, but the sorrow of being unseen, share it. Let this tale live on, not as horror, but as a reflection. Leave a comment with the part that struck you most. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe and help us bring forgotten legends back to life.